Okay.
Okay, ons sit hier so.
Moet ek 'n bietjie opgaan of ek kan nie so ver sien nie. I don't even know what language to begin in. I guess ons het tot nou Afrikaans gepraat, so ons kan maar begin in Afrikaans. Hierdie is Alex Rawlings.
Hi.
En hy praat Afrikaans en 'n hele hoopie ander tale.
Yeah.
So for the people who don't know you on my channel, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, cool. So I'm Alex. About 6 years ago, I was named Britain's most multilingual student after being tested in 11 different languages, one of which was Afrikaans. Yeah, I've studied 15 languages. I've written a book called How to Speak Any Language Fluently, which
This is his book.
handily have a copy of here.
Thank you very much for giving me this book. I'll chat about this later.
Very welcome. Well, I'm working as a content strategist at Memrise. We're basically Memrise, a language learning app. Basically, my job is to come up with the design concepts for the new courses.
That's awesome.
Yeah, think about what we want Memrise to look like in 5 years' time.
That's great. I'm a huge fan of Memrise.
Cool.
So you have a really cool job. I've asked a few people on my social media to come up with a list of questions to ask you. Lee Morrow says, what are your short-term language goals and your long-term language goals?
Gosh.
That's a tough one. I can't answer that
Good
myself.
opening question.
Yeah.
I think we talk a lot about like language goals, generally on social media and stuff like that. And I understand why. I think it's important to always know where you're going when you're learning a new language. But I think the other thing about it is that it's easy to become very distracted thinking about long-term plans, short-term plans.
Definitely.
And then, I don't know about you, but inevitably with me, my plans never work out. It's inevitably 1 month in, it's just gonna go.
Right, and life changes so much. Like you don't know what will happen next month. You'll meet someone or move somewhere.
So what I've been doing the last year, I haven't really added any new languages for a couple of years now, because what I've been doing is I really enjoy the languages that I've got. I don't really feel like I'm missing any. Really, I mean, clearly there's gaps. I mean, I'd love to learn Chinese one day, and I think it's great that you're learning all these Asian languages. I'm very, very jealous, but that's probably because your life is taking you in that direction.
Right, indeed, yeah.
And I've always lived in Europe, so I've always learned European languages. There were a whole load of South Africans living in London when I was growing up, so I used to hear Afrikaans people gossiping on the tube every single day. And that's why I learned the language.
Is that really the reason you started learning Afrikaans?
Yeah, and I had a couple
I was
of
going to ask you, like, what on earth made you learn? Because usually it's Dutch, and Afrikaans is that little one in the corner that no one wants to learn.
Afrikaans, I like Dutch a lot, and you know, no offense to anyone who speaks Dutch, but I think Afrikaans is a lot more efficient.
Thank you.
It's like Afrikaans takes all the kind of unnecessary padding from Dutch and just gets rid of it. So
he has a good point.
So you know. Praten is to speak. Do you really need that extra
No, you do not.
So Afrikaans just go praat.
Very
and then
simple.
Dutch, for example, you've got praten and you've got spreken, one means talk and one means speak. And Afrikaans is like, do we really need this difference? You just open your mouth and praat. So you just praat both.
I did not.
And yeah, well, you know, all these kind of it's nice with Dutch. I think Dutch is a great language, but with Afrikaans, what I really loved about Afrikaans and why I think I really kind of enjoyed learning it is because you just cut off all of this extra stuff and then pack so much meaning into
simple,
very short syllables.
Have you ever been, inevitably, I'm sure you've been in this situation because I've been in it a lot, where you are practicing your target language with someone, or you meet someone of whatever language, you start speaking to them and they reply in English, very often broken English, you go back to their language and they go back to English. And you keep switching between English and whatever language and they refuse to speak whatever language.
Yeah.
Is that awkward for you? What do you do?
So this is my 6th trip to South Africa, and this is the trip where I've spoken the most Afrikaans. And the reason why is because if you know you're an Afrikaans speaker and you live here, and if you just go outside and start speaking Afrikaans to someone, people will be like, what? Like, you just don't do that.
Yeah.
If they know you're not from there, they see you're a tourist, so they're instantly going to speak English. And that is just the way the world works. And if you really can't get someone to speak any language apart from English there, just cut your losses. Like, you know, what were you really going to get out of that interaction anyway? You know? So
you'd say kind of just give in and keep going English because they're not.
Well, I think if you're focusing on trying to kind of get to a point where you can go to Starbucks and order a coffee in Portuguese without anyone speaking English to you, you're kind of learning languages for the wrong reason. Right? Because for me, learning languages is about connecting with people and it's about friendships. And after 6 trips to South Africa, I finally feel like I've met a lot of people here who will sit down and speak Afrikaans with me. Those conversations are so much more meaningful and so much better for my language than if I was like, hello, krijg koffie alsjeblieft.
Yes.
You know, stuff which is like totally transactional. Keep trying. 6 trips to South Africa, finally got people to speak Afrikaans to me. Now it's time to learn one of the other 9 languages.
Great. Okay, so Ophelia says, what is the most challenging part of organizing the Polyglot Conference?
The most challenging, gosh, maybe the organising part?
I was just about to say, actually, like, how do you go about that?
Gosh, it's an awful lot of work organising the Polyglot Conference for me and for Richard. But we're really, really grateful for when people are able to give us some time, even if it's just time to kind of call up some tourist agencies, help us plan stuff for the actual day, because for neither me nor Richard is the Polyglot Conference a full-time job. There's no way that there's no way we can pay ourselves anything from it, because we organise it for people. We organise it and we keep the costs as low as we can to make sure that kind of we can bring people together in one place and have those connections. The most satisfying part is the conference itself. It's just such an amazing atmosphere every single year. It's so nice to see people coming together and for the first time meeting people who are like them. I'm being here to visit the American International School for Mother Tongue Day, and as I was kind of entering the school, I was talking to one of the bus drivers, and I was like, "Oh, how many languages do you speak?" And he was like, 11?
Yeah, it's
like,
pretty normal
what?
here.
It's like, why do they fly me from the UK to talk to these kids when they're bus drivers teaching 11 languages? So it's like, this is a super amazing place if you love languages. Like, they're everywhere. So,
I was going to ask you actually, so the church I go to in Pretoria is an Afrikaans church, but they use a lot of English, and it actually drives me a little crazy because they'll say something like, ons is so blessed om in hierdie amazing community te wees met julle en julle verstaan nie hoe unbelievable is dit regtig, like really guys. And I'm like, there are words for that. I understand if you're going to say like, ek moet my computer gebruik. You know, that's something people would often say. Does that frustrate you?
I think it's hilarious.
It is.
It's one of the things I love
think it's a shame.
One thing I'd actually really like to look at is kind of code. I mean, I think code switching is fascinating because I grew up bilingually with English and Greek, and we did it all the time. We did it all. Yeah, is it? Yeah, we did it all the time. Code switching. So I find when people also naturally code switch, I'm just amazed. There's an awful lot of Afrikaans influence on South African English. I mean, when I come here, I really notice it. Like, for example, lekker, but even whole kind of grammar things that we don't say in other parts of English. Like, for example, you don't seem to you don't seem to use the word should. You use the word must.
Oh, absolutely! Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was definitely something.
Where must I drop you off? You know, and it's like. Must, that comes from Afrikaans. That's like waar moet ek jou aflaai.
Yes.
And if you want to speak pure Afrikaans, you can. If you want to mix in a little bit of English, I think it's cool. I don't have a problem.
Weston Bishop says, how do you pick your languages? Can you answer this in under a minute?
In under a minute. I pick my languages based on the people I know, the places I want to go to, the countries I'm interested in, and the cultures and foods that I like the most.
That was a great answer. That was like 5 seconds. Fantastic. Okay, Lanny133 says, favorite language to learn.
Oh, that's like asking.
That's like picking a favorite child.
Exactly.
You can't do that.
They're all fun.
Yeah. What was the most challenging one? Was Hungarian?
Hungarian is very hard.
Is Hungarian really the hardest language in the world?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends how you measure kind of how hard something is. Like, Hungarian grammar is pretty regular. There's no exceptions. It's not like French. It's just a case of getting used to the fact that this weird collection of letters means something. Jorga
Corona says, what is the limit you suggest taking a break from a language before you start forgetting it? So in my case, I took French pretty much my whole life at school, and to my embarrassment, I didn't really practice French for 4 years at university, and now I'm 2 years out. And my French has like really gone down the drain with speaking, but my comprehension is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say you can completely forget a language in its entirety. It's always sitting here. You just need to find ways to refresh it.
Absolutely, because I mean, you can never speak a language in its entirety.
Absolutely.
You never get that. One of the things I talk about in this is the fact that you need to be an extreme non-perfectionist when it comes to learning a language. If you get worried about kind of making mistakes, forgetting things, going backwards, then you're setting yourself up for failure. When I was in Russia, I had a teacher who told me that learning a language was like swimming against the current, and if you stop swimming, you just start floating backwards.
That is a really good way to look at it.
So, yeah.
I think perfection is quite a downfall of many language learners, and I think with the popularity of Study Blur. I don't know if you know about Study Blur. So Tumblr has a sub-community called Study Blur where people post their notes, and there's also Lang Blur, so language geeks on Tumblr. It's sort of seen as a place where you post your pretty notes. And people spend so much time trying to make their notes really beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, and they go down this rabbit hole of perfectionism. And I think a lot of time is wasted in language learning when you're trying to write the word as beautifully as possible, lay out your notes. I mean, I have a studygram, I do the same for Hungarian, but I don't spend time picking the perfect pen.
Yeah.
I mean, perfectionism is definitely not something that should go hand in hand with language learning.
It smells like procrastination to me.
Good way of looking at it. Okay, Endless Daybreak says, how do you make language learning processes more fun rather than tedious?
I think that language learning is possibly not that fun.
Language studying is not fun.
Okay.
Language acquisition is
bear with me, okay, slightly controversial, but I don't think it's that fun to memorize grammar tables. I don't know what you think.
I love grammar, but I would rather spend my time practicing grammar than memorizing tables.
So the fun bit for me is not the learning, it's the speaking, and
Absolutely.
it's the using, and it's kind of learning to say hilarious things in different languages, and kind of watching something on Netflix without subtitles and understanding 70%. That's really fun. There's ways to make it fun. So one of the things they train you to do about when you don't enjoy doing things is to kind of combine what you don't enjoy doing with something that you do enjoy doing. But I find though, I'm enjoying it if I'm motivated, and I'm motivated if I feel like I'm learning things that I actually need to say and will use. Jokes that I'd like to be able to tell people in other languages, insults, puns. Those are the kind of things that I enjoy.
Okay, and the next part is, do you recommend finding a language partner once you begin learning, or have solid footing?
I think you should find a language partner before you begin learning, and then learn because you found that language partner.
That is great, yeah. Absolutely. That's why I started learning Hungarian. I had absolutely no interest or knowledge about the language until I met someone online, and I was like, what is this weird language? And that became my motivation. Somaligirl1234 says, does being able to pick up the sounds in another language have to do with good hearing? And she's wondering if her theory is perhaps that her ears are good at honing into sounds.
Possibly. I'm not really qualified to comment on that because I'm not like an expert in that field. But I guess it makes sense. If you have good hearing, you hear different sounds.
I have terrible hearing, and people often tell me to please speak more softly, but it's because I can't hear myself. I think it's like my sinuses or something, so I talk loudly because I can't hear myself. But I believe I'm really good at imitating accents, and that also helps me to get a bit of a more native accent in the languages I'm learning. So I think maybe some of it does have to do with being able to hear sounds and distinguish between sounds, especially in a language like Mandarin where you have tones.
Yeah.
But I have terrible hearing, so I'm not sure if I prove that theory correct.
Yeah.
Isaac Sarver says, I'm curious, for someone so involved in the polyglot community, what are ways you have received positive inspiration and tips from other polyglots, and has it always been generally the same over the years or not?
The best piece of advice I've ever received from a polyglot, and this was from Richard Simcoe. We were on a plane going somewhere, and he had a language book, I can't remember what, and I was spending like a week with him traveling, and I was like, oh, this is a good opportunity for me to get some Richard's tips. And so he was reading this unit, and I was like, oh, Richard, how many times would you read that unit through in order to, before you move on?
Yeah.
Because that's sort of the question I have. How many times do I read through one page before I move to the next?
Right.
And he was like, I don't know, as many times as it takes for me to remember it. And I was like, oh yeah. Maybe it is really that simple. That,
it is, yeah.
If you don't remember it, go back. If you do remember it, move on. Within that piece of advice is so much of the kind of really essential thinking behind the non-perfectionist attitude. If you can make mistakes, you can kind of, have patches here and there. It doesn't necessarily have to happen overnight. In fact, quite the opposite. Learning languages takes years and years and years and years and years. But having said that, that doesn't mean that there's not an awful lot you can do in the meantime.
Absolutely. And I also get asked a lot, like, how many hours do you spend studying a day, or how many words should I learn a day? That's actually a question here. Someone says, what's the ideal number of words I should be learning each day? And I don't count. Like, people have asked me, how many kanji do you know? I don't know. I just sort of pick it up as I go along. I don't sit with a schedule and say, today I'm going to learn these 500 words.
If you're focusing too much on the goals, on the endpoints, on the
Numbers.
number of words you want to learn, all that kind of thing, basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to get to the point where you don't have to study anymore as quickly as possible. And that for me is the wrong attitude. You should, the whole point is that you shouldn't try to rush through that learning process, because the learning process should be fun, it should be enjoyable, and it should be an opportunity for you to kind of learn a lot about yourself and kind of the world. You know, saying things like, let's learn 10 words a day, for me it's like, no, well, let's learn even fewer words than that, because I'm enjoying it and because actually I like the process of putting new words in my head, and I want that to last for as long as possible.
Okay, the last question. Someone says, how many languages could I learn at the same time in theory? I'm already learning Japanese, Chinese, and Korean, but want to learn Arabic and Hebrew. What is the average limit? I've gotten that question as well. Like, it's hard to answer that for someone.
It's very hard to answer that for someone, because ultimately it depends on the amount of time that you've got. As an adult, even working for a language company, I don't have the time anymore to do that, and kind of a lot more of my time is now spent on Google Drive, which is not conducive to learning languages. So right now for me, I'd say the limit is one at a time.
Yeah, I've heard many people say rather learn the language up to an intermediate level at least, and then move on to the next one.
Sure.
But it's not impossible to learn 2 or 3 new ones at the same time. It
No,
just
it's
depends
not.
on your motivation.
It's not,
time.
but don't push it.
Yeah, right. Well, that concludes all the questions we've received. Thank you so much for appearing on my show that doesn't have a title. If you've got anything else you want to say to the viewers out there.
No, thank you so much for sending your questions in. Good luck with learning languages. Enjoy it. Make sure it lasts as long as possible, because it's the most exciting thing that you could ever do in your lives. And just remember that kind of you're growing your brain every day, and that's really, really cool.
And guys, be sure to check out Alex's book. I'll be talking about it once I've finished reading it. And that is it for today. Thank you so much, Alex. Bye,
Thank you. Bless you.